Poetry and drama from three extraordinary authors. We have already mentioned Francesco Petrarca. This is a drawing in which he appears with his beloved Laura Portinari, a young woman who also died before him, and he never realized that he was going to be longing for her for the rest of his life. That was his form of faithfulness. Laura serves as the inspiration of his sonnets and his many compositions. One of them, the famous sonnet Soleassi nel mio cor, which is going to help us to understand the original form of the sonnet as was perfected by Petrarch. Let's read it. She ruled in beauty over this heart of mine, a noble lady in a humble home, and now her time for heavenly bliss has come. It is I am mortal proof, and she divine, the soul that all its blessings must reign, and love whose light no more on earth finds room, might rend the rocks with pity for their doom, yet none their sorrows can in words enshrine. They wake within my heart, and ears are deaf, save mine alone, and I am crushed with care, and naught remains to me save mournful breath. Assuredly but dust and shade we are, assuredly desire is blind and brief, assuredly its hope but ends in death. The Petrarchan sonnet is the classical form of the sonnet, usually divided in one rhyming octave, also divided, according to some critics, in two quartets, with rhyme that could be A, B, B, A, B, A, B, or also A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. 8 lines or 2 quartets, or also called one octave. And the second part usually signals a turn. The first part tends to be the exposition of a situation, maybe a question to. The second part tends to be the response. And the second part is called a sestet, or also, according to some critics, 2 tercets that have a rhyme of the type C, D, C, D, C, D. There is a possible change in the combination. What matters here is that the Petrarchan sonnet has a structure of 8 lines plus 6 lines that mark the difference of the theme that the poet is focusing on. One of his great followers was the Spanish poet Garcilaso de la Vega, whose art is expressed very well in his sonnet 23, a classical remaking of the Carpe Diem topic. Remember Horace, the great Roman poet, who advised young people to seize the day, to live the moment, to enjoy beauty, health, youth, because it doesn't last too long, and doesn't last, and therefore when we lose it, we miss it. Garcilaso also said that this young woman to whom he is referring needs to live the moment. The impact, the impression she makes in the poet is the proof of her extreme beauty. Let's read it together. Sonnet 23. While there is yet the color of the rose and of the lily in your countenance, and while the burning candor of your glance can fire the heart and yet constrain its throes, and while yet that soft hair of yours which flows from a gold vein in a dishevelled dance is tangled by wind's sudden dalliance, as round that lovely proud white neck it blows. Gather the harvest from your joyous spring, of sweetest fruit before time comes in rage, of snow to cover that fair peak at last. The rose will wither in the wind's chill blast, so changing everything comes flighty age, never to change its way for anything. Enjoy your beauty, enjoy your youth while you can. Live the moment. This is something that was not invented by Garcilaso or by Petrarch. It comes from the Romans and the Greeks. And the structure of the Petrarchan sonnet in Spanish was very successful. Spanish Renaissance owes a lot to Petrarch because the renewal of poetry in Spain in the 16th century adopted the Italian forms, the rhythms, and at the same time renewed the style of the Spanish language. And then another kind of poem called the English sonnet, also known as a Shakespearean sonnet, also has 14 lines. The lines are shorter, but the structure is different. As we will see, there is usually 3 stanzas or quatrains formed by 12 lines, and a last coda or ending final with only 2 lines. These are called quatrains and a couplet. 3 quatrains, 12 lines, 1 couplet. In his sonnet 130, Shakespeare kind of makes fun of the Petrarchan style of this exaggerated image of the beautiful, perfect woman, also nurtured by Neoplatonic ideas. And he writes, "My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun? If hers be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare." No? Which is like a turn of the screw to the stereotype of the perfect woman and the wounded poet. Shakespeare loves his mistress for who she is, but at the same time, he's taking some distance from the Petrarchan style. A famous sonnet of the 154 sonnets that Shakespeare wrote, published in 1609, that were one of the greatest contributions to English literature. But together with his poems and his sonnets, Shakespeare wrote several dramas and comedies. Here we see a classical portrait of the young Shakespeare and a more mature Shakespeare, probably in the early 16th century. His many dramas include Hamlet, which is the paradigm of doubt, to be or not to be, the conflict of a man who needs to make a decision, to avenge his father or to stay away from violence. Then Julius Caesar, about loyalty, about legality, about respecting heroism. Othello, the jealous husband, who ends up killing Desdemona because of a series of misunderstandings. This is the stereotype of the impetuous man, the stereotype of the passionate man who cannot control his desires and his fears. Romeo and Juliet, a very well-known story, 2 teenagers in the city, an Italian city, that fall in love, but they belong to enemy families. Nonetheless, they manage to be together due to a series of misunderstandings. When one fakes his death, the other commits suicide, and they both end up tragically dead. A story about love, passion, and extremes of human misunderstanding. And finally, the typical straight-on-Avon theater that was the scenario of many of Shakespeare's representations, both dramas, tragedies, and comedies.